Sometimes we forget why we're here. It's easy to fall off track. These help us remember.
These battle scars don't look like they're fading, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battles.
Growing up, I had a dream, something no one else could see. Tell me what it means when your faith is falling beneath your knees and you can't breathe. Everything you see reminds you of what you're not or something you won't be. You gotta take what you're given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians and choose to be an accountant because it's safe in a business. Not because they wanna do it, just because they heard it pays. And who the fuck wants to be poor knowing that's how we've been raised? Society is getting heavy, I can feel the weight. The pressure of success is like 100 million pounds of shame. And that's the reason I'm staying up late, trying to find a way to escape the stereotypes this day and age is making me feel like the only way I'll be happy is getting signed to a label and making money through rapping. I wanna share my emotion because this world is attacking the very principle of life that lets the people be happy. If you don't have a reason to breathe, why even live? These battle scars are impressions of everything that it is.
Don't look like they're fading, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battle scars don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battles.
Now, if I had a voice that reached 100 million people, I'd tell them there's a reason that we're all created equal. Cause some decide to be great and some decide a sequel to an average person's life is simply what they want to be. So you make your decision, all I know is what I'm given. Won't define the life I lead or the way I dwell in existence. I've seen a greater image on the walls of where I'm living, and the words twisted and scripted remind me of something written. Faith is a gift that is given down to the people. If one believes it, one receives it. It's given if it is needed. Don't ever think you're trapped in a life that you never wanted. Your options are infinite, that's some mathematical logic. I'm not saying I'm a prophet, I'm speaking for what it's worth. These lyrics define my prayers and these battle scars on my church. Not saying I'm a prophet, I'm speaking for what it's worth. These lyrics define my prayers, these battle scars on my church.
Don't look like they're fading, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change. These battle scars don't look like they're fading, don't look like they're ever gone away. They ain't never gonna change.
Well, hello everyone. I keep having to move where I'm sitting because when I bring Drew on, I'm going to have to reposition myself because I haven't yet put X's on the floor where I need to sit when I bring a guest on. But it's going to be a very brief introduction. I know a lot of people were looking forward to the show after a discussion we had last week. So we're going to be speaking in a few moments with Drew of the Sober Caucus. And I don't want to give too much details as to what he's going to talk about. Leave that all for him. And hello, Dave. I see you're doing all your testing on Roku. What's faster, Facebook, Roku, or YouTube phone? But Drew, when he's brought on, he probably can see now, can see your chats. So please ask any questions or any comments that you have. And any super chats done during the show will go to the Sober Caucus. However, I'm going to have up on the screen Venmo and Cash App links for him. That is probably the better way to donate because YouTube takes a cut of super chats and those only get paid out once a month. So he'd have to wait a little while. Whereas if you gave directly, he'll get the money right away. Convention's coming up and I'm sure they have expenses. But either way, if you prefer to do super chats, again, any super chats done during the show will all go after YouTube fees to the Sober Caucus. But before we get started, I'm not doing any promo of my own. I've got a million things to do with that, but I do. We're entering the big times here in Pinkland. I have another sponsor, like a professional sponsor, and it's the first time I'm doing their ad, and I got to be careful because I have this I have this weird tendency to make everything filthy. I don't know what it is. I can make Robert's Rules of Order filthy. I can I can make the end of the world filthy. So I got to be careful with my advertisers, because unless it's like adamandeve.com, like this, we got to keep this family friendly. So hopefully hopefully I do not mess this up. So let me see what we got going on here. Let me pull up this little, there we go. And I'm going to pronounce it, hopefully, this side of the screen. See, it's opposite. Asteros, like Fred Astaire. So this is a friend of mine, Zach Varnell. He's become a top tier sponsor of the show. Remember, when you're a top tier sponsor, you get regular ads on the show and also on my radio show, which airs at 1360 KHNC in Weld County, Colorado. But I'm actually so intrigued by what Zach's company does. He does what's called, oh God, it's going to be so hard for me not to make this dirty. He does penetration testing, but it's for cybersecurity. So if you have a business or an organization of any kind, you know how vulnerable it can be to cyber attacks. So what his company does is run mock testing and mock simulations as to the types of things that the bad guys might be doing to your company, and help you fix it and train your volunteers or your employees on ways to avoid phishing, on the latest tricks and tactics that not just criminals will do, but even in our realm, you know, with political organizations, even other nation states or people that are just looking to cause trouble. So he does vulnerability management, security awareness training. So if that sort of thing interests you, if you would like to have a free, like, surface mock attack on your business, like what did he call it? I loved what he called it here. An attack surface audit. I actually want to have that on my email. I'm just curious how easy it is to hack my email, but I'm not going to invite him to do that because it's probably super, super easy. But if you have an organization or a company that you're really interested in seeing how vulnerable you are, take advantage of his free offer where he'll do this like surface attack, and you'll see how easy, sometimes it's scary easy, how is, you think you're so secure. Password 1234 is not secure, just in case you didn't know that. But you can see the way the name is spelled on the screen. It's STEROS. And if you go STEROS.com/free, you can take advantage of that offer. And I thank you so much, Zach, for sponsoring this show. And I guarantee you it will get better and cleaner as we go on. But you just know me. I have the mind of a sophomore. Of sophomore boy. So thank you so much for your sponsorship. And G. Jelf had asked how much a sponsorship is. My top tier sponsors are $50 a month. They get regular ad mentions. It's not every show because people will get tired of hearing of you every show, but it's at least once a week. And also on my radio show at least once a month, and it's usually more than once a month, plus a free t-shirt. What a deal, and my everlasting love. So without further ado, let us bring on Drew. Oh, I made a rhyme. I'm a poet and didn't know. Without further ado, let's bring on Drew. And I'm going to have to figure out where I'm going to need to scoot over in order to be in frame. This is one part I haven't yet, and I got to add him to the right. Add him to the right? Is that what I did last? We'll figure it out. Let me pull up this screen here. Here we go. There you are. That went smoother than I thought.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thank you for being on. Now, let me pull up my audio here, my sound levels, because I want to pull you up, I think, a little bit here. If you could talk for me.
Hello? Testing?
Yep.
Testing?
Yep, that's good. Okay. And if you can maybe, there we go. I got you. All right. Perfect. So how about, I'm going to let you do a lot of talking, though that never really works out, does it? I always end up interrupting everybody. But across the top there is the Cash App and Venmo's right here that I promised, which will be quicker for you. But again, any super chats, though, you know how YouTube is. They pay out once a month and they take their fee. They're providing a service, so I don't ever begrudge them their fee. They make things easy for people. Oh Lord, people are already getting. You can
I'm telling
ignore
you.
that. You can ignore that. I asked for that, I suppose, with my intro. You can ignore those those comments. So, why don't you tell us all about what your organization is doing, particularly what's going on at the national convention and things like that.
Okay, so the Sober Caucus is a group of people within the Libertarian Party who, practice recovery or sobriety in one way, shape, or form or the other. When we created our bylaws, when we created this caucus, we specifically did not draw a line on what sobriety is and what sobriety isn't. That's going to change from person to person. The only thing that we ask is whenever we have a meetup at a convention or an event anywhere, just, hey, don't bring any booze or narcotics out. That's all. That's the only thing. So in Reno, we will have a hospitality room where, you can come and not have to worry about booze being around or, drugs of any kind. And you'll be able to hang out with us and enjoy other people doing the same, or just get to meet us. We will have coffee, some snacks, all the goodies that a good hospitality room would have. And so that's what we got going on in Reno.
Well, that sounds awesome. And I assume that you are indeed raising funds to have those sorts of things there, and that you would appreciate any donations to that.
Yeah.
I think what you're doing is wonderful. I told you a little bit, or you heard on the show a little bit of my backstory. Now, I personally don't struggle with addiction. I consider myself fortunate. I don't think it's anything. I mean, there might be a little bit of willpower there, but I really don't think that's what it is. I've had family members who are some of the strongest people that I knew. My mother struggled with lifelong. She was a functional alcoholic. From the moment she'd wake up in the morning, she'd have a diet, soda that she'd pour out the soda and pour straight vodka in. I once accidentally as a child picked it up and, took a swig. And she worked every single day of her life. She wasn't out in the streets, but she was a drunk. I mean, loved my mother, but she never ever could get over the alcoholism. My brother died from, not directly from like a drug overdose, but from a lifetime of hard living of drugs and alcohol. So I've seen up close what it can do. And it's not just a matter of willpower. It's genetics. It's not having sometimes the proper social support systems in place. And what I found so fascinating about your group is because what I found a lot with when you have people who've had tragic stories in their life, and I'm thinking particularly of a Ron Paul interview from a while ago where he got a little saucy with the guy that that got in his face. But basically a mother had stood up and it's like, well, you're for legalizing all drugs, but I lost my son to heroin. And it seems like a lot of groups that are promoting a sober lifestyle are also promoting the force of the state as well. So I'd like to know how I don't see it as squaring a circle, but some other people who might run across the show might go, how can you know the damage that substances can do to a person's life and still think they should all be legal? So I'd love to hear your answer to that.
Yeah, so it all comes down to the fact that mother's son died while that drug was illegal. The legality of that substance had no bearing on whether or not they would overdose. And I would say that today's drug market is much more dangerous to the consumer than it was back then. We see a rise of fentanyl showing up, and not just heroin, not just opiates, but it's showing up in methamphetamines, it's showing up in cocaine. And, the CDC will classify these deaths as overdoses, but in reality, what they are is drug poisonings. Whenever you take a substance and it's not exactly what you thought it was, you have been poisoned if you die from that. And so here's the thing, right? Dead addicts cannot find recovery. Dead addicts cannot find that freedom that I have found and others have found. So if we really care about that person who's struggling, we will offer them the best possible pathway for them to seek help whenever the time comes that they are ready to, but to keep them alive long enough to do so. And therein lies another fine line. So, here's the thing, right? Like, I have been involved in this recovery game for a very, very long time. And it seems like the Republican solution is drug court and criminalization. And it seems like the Democrat solution is to overburden the rehabilitation industry with licensing restrictions and using tax dollars to inflate the prices of all of these things. So, like, you have to rely on the state in order to find half-assed help with their plans. So, to me, libertarians are the only ones that have a tangible solution. And to be honest with you, the 12-step recovery community, the coffee pot at your local AA meeting has done more to combat drug addiction than the entire DEA. Okay. And it cost $0 to the taxpayer. AA, NA, those 12-step programs, they do not take any funding outside of what they raise among themselves. They do not take any tax grants, tax money at all. Hell, if they get donated a room from a church, they still pay the church for that room. They will not take it for free. So in my mind, recovery is the peak libertarian philosophy at play. It's grassroots free market capitalism doing what it does best, and that is finding a solution that operates within the system, come hell or high water. And so for me, it's a very personal thing. And, you mentioned that, you see a lot of people in recovery who are like way on board with the cops, kicking in doors and drug bust and all that, kill your local heroin dealer, all this and that. And I think that if they sat down and took the emotion away from it, they would come to the same conclusion that I am. And that is, in order for us to truly help that next person, we need to make it a pathway needs to be able to present itself to where they can seek that help, seek that solution, right? And that doesn't happen with these drugs being criminalized. That doesn't happen with the stigma continuing to be pushed through laws being what they are. An addict seeking recovery today, if you are somebody that has actually created a life for themselves, so like you talked about, your mom was a functioning alcoholic. There are functioning addicts today. Maybe they're not on black tar heroin, but I can assure you they're probably on Loratab. They're probably on some other doctor prescribed medication, and they are deathly afraid of admitting, hey, I have a problem, because, oh my God, what's work going to think? There goes that promotion I've been working for. There goes my standing, with all the keeping up with the Joneses and all of that. There is a very real stigma that is around this idea of addiction. And I think what exacerbates it and perpetuates it is policy as it stands today.
That I agree with absolutely everything you said, and the way it also, I've had these discussions with Kara Schultz, who is a cancer survivor, and the drug war is even affecting people who aren't addicts but need desperately high dose pain medications, and they might even become addicts. But shouldn't it be that person's choice? Do I want to live with excruciating pain, or do I want to live maybe with a drug that I'm dependent upon? There's a letter that was in I think it was an old LP News, and it struck me. I read it like 5 years ago when I first started doing party history, where it was a letter that somebody wrote to their senator and said, I'd rather live with a monkey on my back than the dragon that currently lives there, because he was in such excruciating pain. And when Kara was telling me stories of cancer patients that have suicide kits for the day that they can't get their prescription medications anymore, that just broke my heart. That should be everybody's personal choice. Now, I've been a chronic pain patient. I've been on and off pain medications my whole life. I just think I have good genes. I don't think it's will. I just think I have good's not even the right word. I'm blessed with certain genes that keep me from becoming addicted, because I've never had an addiction problem. But I know I live in fear of the days when, if I should have a flare-up again, I can't get medication, and even within the libertarian community. So when I have flare-ups, what I take is something that's still currently legal, which is kratom. Haven't probably taken it now in a couple of weeks, so I haven't had a flare-up. But I get shamed even within the libertarian community for that, for trying to find alternatives to what could be worse, And something else that super angered me that you might not be aware of, there's a company out there called Dance Safe. Have you heard of them?
Yes, I have. I
Yeah.
interviewed them on my show a while back.
They're fantastic, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And I read their literature. And when and I don't know if this is still the case, but I know they were selling test kits for fentanyl and cocaine. And then Amazon pulled it. Amazon wouldn't let them sell it through Amazon. And it's like, somebody who's addicted to cocaine is going to be doing it anyway. Why would you not want them at least to have some kind of inexpensive resource so that they're not killing themselves or a friend that they happen to be sharing with? That just absolutely outraged me. It outrages me too when you don't want, these communities are like, oh, well, we don't want these centers where someone can get clean needles or things like that. But on one hand, I don't approve of the NIMBY attitude, but I do understand it. But I don't understand somebody ordering from the privacy of their own home a package from Amazon and not being able to get it. That's not bringing down your property value, okay?
I'm going to tell you a story. So out here in Oklahoma, you cannot purchase clean hypodermic needles unless you have a prescription. No matter what, bottom line, I got a little over 2 years clean. I've been in the rooms for like 10 years. I had a relapse that was just brutal. And on this relapse, I could not find a clean needle anywhere. Right. And so I called a local urgent care clinic and I said, listen, and I made up this story. I fabricated it, but all the same, this person I spoke with didn't know that. I spoke with the nurse and I said, listen, I have dope and I have a used needle that came from an HIV positive patient. If you do not help me find a place to where I can get a clean needle tonight, I'm going to contract the HIV virus knowingly because I don't have any other options. And they said, there is nothing I could do for you except get you into treatment. That is the state that we are in now. I have watched, so like the loophole out here that people have is they will go to Tractor Supply or another livestock equipment store, and they'll buy livestock needles. I can't tell you how many times I've seen addicts mutilate their arms with just an insanely large needle trying to get their fix. And I'm kind of like you, I understand like some of that apprehension, but at the baseline of it, it doesn't make any sense to me. You should be able to buy clean needles. You should be able to buy fentanyl test strips. And just want to throw this out there. Dance Safe does have those fentanyl test strips for sale on their website if you go and find them. And whether or not two things everybody should have on them. If you hang out in the club, you need to have fentanyl test strips. But everybody, whether in the club or not, you need to have Narcan, at least a dose somewhere in your house, just with you, where you have easy access to it. That stuff saves lives. And I'm sorry, I'm not trying to derail the conversation, but
no, that's not at all.
Harm reduction.
No, harm reduction, I think, is part and parcel of the whole thing, because, I know people who have tried to get clean. It's not a one and done thing.
Nope.
And so you gotta have the backup plan, or it might not be you. It could be your friend. It could be your friend you don't know about, particularly if you're going to gatherings. You may be the person that helps save someone else's life. No, I absolutely agree with you. When my ex-husband and I used to do some homeless ministry, we had ran into a guy who was addicted to heroin and he wanted to get clean. We could not get him in any place. The only places that we could get him into, their recovery plan was cold turkey. And that just terrified this guy, and we never saw him again. I don't know whatever happened to him, but we were trying our hardest to get him some help. And the only places that would take a heroin addict were some really, really extreme religious, you just stop, we're going to lock you in a room until you go. And I've never done heroin, so I have no idea what that's like, but all I know is the look of absolute terror on this guy's face. And you think that you find someone who wants help. Okay, well, that's the big step. That's not sometimes. It's getting them the help that's the big step.
Yeah. So the funny thing is that like this story you're describing, there was a priest back in the 1950s in New York. His name was Father Dan Egan. Okay. And He was, upstanding member of the Catholic community, had his own, I don't understand terminology, I guess, church, parish, whatever you want to call it. And one day he was leaving, work, going home, and saw a woman who was obviously suffering terribly from withdrawals. She was dope sick, was wanting to get clean. And he said, "Hey, don't worry, just hang out here. Here's some money, just get you some food for the night. I'll be back tomorrow. We'll get you in a hospital, get you taken care of." And he came back the next day, tried to get her into a hospital, and there was no such thing as detox at that time. There was no such thing as recovery for opiate withdrawal. It did not exist, right? That was not a conversation the medical professional community was having. And he made it his life goal to help out addicts. And he actually got the name of junkie priest. It was an insult thrown at him by a beat cop, and he wore it with honor, right? The junkie priest. There's actually a movie about him. But during this time in that part of the country, in New York, there was these things called Rockefeller laws. And these laws actually outlawed 12-step meetings from taking place among addicts, because they said no more than one addict can occupy a space at a given time. How they determine that, I don't know. I would imagine it's from your rap sheet or whatever, but Narcotics Anonymous was outlawed for a spell there. But when the Catholic Church is taking a stand with you and not the local government, I mean, if I was the local government, I might want to take a look at, what the hell I'm doing, because, man, that these people were needing help. They were needing to be helped out. But, I saw in the chat, the site that we mentioned was dancesafe.org. I believe it's a .org. Do you know, Karen?
Yeah, it's .org. And I think they got their start selling MDMA test kits at raves, so that's why it's called Dance Safe. But they've branched out into, you can get test kits there for almost any kind of popular street drug right now.
Yeah. So want to kind of come full circle with that story. So at the time the junkie priest was in its heyday, the medical community said that there is no hope for the addict. Fast forward to today, and that conversation has drastically changed to where they're now saying there is hope for the addict. But those 12-step meetings, that recovery stuff that those addicts talk among themselves, there's some truth to that, but we have the real solution. And what they do is they create all these positions within a given structure. So if you receive grant funding, if you receive insurance funding to any degree, every state's going to have a board that dictates what certifications the people who work in that facility need to have, right? So, for instance, I work in substance abuse and mental health. I am not able to be any more than a entry-level employee until I have a college degree. I could run laps around pretty much anybody out here who's anybody. When we talk about recovery and addiction, I can tell you how to get clean. I understand what it takes, but that does not matter at all. So it's just wild to me that we have seen this paradigm shift from such a far extreme one direction to another extreme in the other. And are you familiar? Have you heard of Suboxone? Do you know what Suboxone is?
No.
Okay, so here's the thing. It's an opiate blocker. This is what they give heroin addicts, opiate addicts who are coming down and wanting to get clean. And when used properly, it is a fantastic tool because it will prevent the person from getting dope sick. So for those in the audience who don't understand what that looks like for a heroin addict, when you're coming down, it is the worst possible feeling you could have. I'm talking cold sweats, achy joints. Like when I was coming down, I couldn't even take a damn shower because water hurt my skin. Like it was not fun. But this Suboxone, when used long enough, will have a worse withdrawal than the heroin itself. Here's where it gets really messed up, is that they hand this stuff out like candies in rehabilitation centers across the country to anybody and everybody. So long as they claim that they have a problem with opiates. Never mind if they're, court ordered, they're just in there for, smoking a joint. They want to get high in treatment. They're given an opportunity to do so, and the taxpayers pay for it. Grants are pushed heavily with They call it medication assisted treatment, MAT. And these grants will have MAT requirements attached to them. So we are doping up the addicts of today's generation in rehab. It doesn't make any sense. Like, it's so crazy. That's what you get, though, when you let the government run recovery.
Yeah, I think I might have known what that was, but just never heard it said out loud. Like, I've read it. So, because now I do think I know, I know exactly what you mean. What kind of, like, it's so surprising to me that there hasn't been something like this before at one of our conventions. So what inspired you to start this? Just your own interests, or do you think that, like, I mean, just a funny story, just in general, this is my experience, might not be yours. Libertarians tend to be a little bit more, to use the term square or whatever you want to put it, than your average bear sometimes. When I was a brand new libertarian, I'm like, I'm going to this convention called LPEX in Las Vegas, and I'm like, oh my God, it's going to be wild and crazy. So I was rooming with this lady I had just barely met, Lily Tang Williams, who a lot of people know. And we're at the slots, and the little waitress comes on by. She orders milk. And that's been generally my experience, that libertarians like to talk a lot about, you're legalized this and that, and then they're in bed at 10 and they drink water. But have you seen maybe a side I haven't seen where there's, a larger need for this sort of thing than I might even know?
So for me, the Sober Caucus has a twofold mission. First off and foremost, the most important thing has been providing an atmosphere and a place, if you're new in recovery, long in recovery, doesn't matter, or you're just curious about recovery, where you can come hang out. The other part of it too is that I have this firm belief that people that are in recovery, 9 times out of 10, they've been churned through the criminal justice system. Having a group of people within the party that anybody can point to and say, you know what, I'm not real brushed up on that particular issue regarding the war on drugs, but if you talk to these guys, I bet they can help you out. So that's kind of the other part of it. So like, and I'm the host of the Clean Libertarian podcast, and it's just a little podcast I do a lot of stories of recovery, a lot of stuff about drug policy. And what started as when I had my libertarian baby shoes on, I was just now getting started. I was in some Facebook group and somebody said, okay, well, when we end the war on drugs, what's the libertarian solution to drug addiction? And somebody said Darwinism. And there was quite a bit of agreement with that. And I was like, man,
that is like the most cold-hearted bullshit I've heard.
It's same. I mean, but here's the thing is that I recently talked with Hannah Cox. I was on their show, and I mentioned the same thing with them, and they were just as shocked as you are, but I literally got off there and hopped on Twitter, and I saw a literal post that said something exactly along those lines. So this
would
is
people
still
say
something...
that if someone was born blind? What's the solution for disabled people? Darwinism. I mean, Isn't not being that way what makes us human beings?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the thing, right? But I think that and it kind of got me thinking. It got me talking to a lot of people, and it's not a known fact to a lot of people in the party who haven't ever known anybody in recovery or been experienced with recovery, that they don't understand exactly how organic of an organization these 12-step fellowships are. They don't understand that they are completely devoid of any influence from the state whatsoever, and they don't take any funding. Like, this is a peak libertarian solution. And so that's what kind of started out the podcast. And I'm going to be real honest, I don't really remember what led me to wanting a Sober Caucus outside of, like, I wanted to have somebody to kick it with sober when I went to a convention. Yeah. So I put up a poll on my Twitter page, and I think like 10 people agreed, like, yeah, that'd be cool. And then we just started making it happen. And little by little, we're picking up steam. But one of the things that we've always maintained is that, it's a issues caucus only. It will never be a candidate caucus. And so like in the present sense, what we want, like I said at the beginning, was to have sober inclusive spaces at libertarian events. In the future, one of the goals that we have is to actually have enough money to be able to provide scholarships to LP members who are seeking treatment, particularly if you have a local candidate for a campaign who's considering running, but they're afraid to because they can't get clean. Like, kick them to us in a discreet manner. We can get them in a treatment, get them plugged in. That's the overall goal. That's what we want to see happen.
And it would be really awesome to have good, not just on this issue, but particularly on this issue, since, you know, it's your special focus. We don't have good educational material on this stuff anymore. We used to, as a party, have some very, very detailed white papers and all kinds of informational material on how the drug war is a war on everybody. You know, it's not just an addict's problem. It's not just that person on the streets problem. You can trace almost every bad policy in this country to the drug war in one sense or another. You know, the person who's getting the $10,000 seized from them because they don't want to put it in the bank and they're going to buy a new car or whatever. That's because of the drug war. And that person may never have taken a drug in their life, never even had it enter their mind. But so much can be just traced back to the drug war. People are getting smuggled across the border because of that. You know, I mean, like, so many things trace back to the drug war. It's insane. It touches everyone's lives, even if they've never touched a drug in their life.
Yeah. You look at things like civil asset forfeiture, look at the militarization of police. Matter of fact, the Department of Homeland Security, and other people don't know this, when they were created, that was just an extension of the DEA. It was during the hype of they really pushed forward after 9/11, the war on terror, blah, 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 this and that. I was getting way high at the time, and I was around. And let me tell you, I knew a few people who got busted by the Department of Homeland Security for simply selling drugs, like full-on raids, confidential informants in the bit. So, yeah, pretty much, like you said, any policy that we don't like as libertarians can be traced back directly to it being, excused or being made possible because of this crazy war on drugs, war on substances, you know?
Well, you want to hear something crazy? I've mentioned this before. I don't even know why it didn't even occur to me before. So speaking of people who can be around drugs but then never touch it themselves, okay, the only reason I talk about these things is my parents are since deceased. Like, I would never talk about my mom's problems publicly like this when she was alive, but my parents are both long since deceased. My dad was a drug dealer. My dad never worked an IRS reporting job his entire life. Most of the time I remember him selling cocaine, and there were relatives that every once in a while did some cocaine, and he would sell to these relatives of my mother, and she would be furious, and he would say, at least I know it's not tainted. I'd rather they get it from me. Now, I'm still not so sure how I feel about that, but it was a reality in our house, and he ended up going to jail for a long time for that. So, like, really, it just never even occurred to me to even think of that, because that's just been so normalized in my particular life. But here's what's funny. My dad used to be an alcoholic. One day when I was an infant, 3-year-old toddler, sitting on my mom's lap, he used to domestically abuse my mother. That never stopped. He went to throw a punch at her because he was drunk. His aim missed, and instead he punched his 3-year-old daughter in the face. And he quit that night. He quit drinking that night, quit doing drugs the next day, and owned bars and dealt drugs for the rest of his life, and never touched another one. I don't know how he did it. I suppose maybe punching your 3-year-old in the face will do it. But, wish punching your wife in the face would have done it. But it's just strange the way things can affect different people. But, when I say it's touched my life, yeah, it's really touched my life in a big way. So I really do, absolutely, believe in what you're doing, and wanted to help get the word spread out, because this and mental health, I think, are still the two biggest stigmas that people don't like talking about or don't like admitting. And when they do talk about it, you do end up getting shamed, even in the libertarian community. I happen to be one who talks a lot about mental health because I have mental health struggles. I struggle with major depressive disorder very badly at certain times, other times not. And the amount of shame for that is still incredible. I can't imagine if I had to come out and admit, hey, you know what? Last year I relapsed into a cocaine addiction or something like that. And we should be able to talk about these things. They're very, very human problems that have existed just with different substances from the beginning of time. And they're not going away by keeping silent about it.
No, and I'm a dual diagnosed case. I struggle with major depressive disorder, anxiety. I struggle with ADD. So you couple that with drug addiction, and the reality of it is for a long time I was just self medicating. That's all that was, and the problem is that for people like myself, like I could be, and I constantly try to peel back the curtain, and to anyone who will listen, just throw it out into the abyss of Twitter, talking about kind of the stuff that goes on in between my ears. But there are moments where, I could be going along just fine. Like I talked about having a relapse. I relapsed after 7.5 years clean, and it was a public relapse. Like, I had the Clean Libertarian blog going at that time.
Yeah.
Like, it was, that was fun. That was fun coming back from that. But hey, I'm back. It's going to be okay. But I tend to agree that you start talking about having mental health problems and people think you're weak for some reason. That is the instant connotation. And I think even more so, it's one of those things that we all kind of fear the state knowing about. I know, having firearms in my vicinity and knowing that if the government knows that and knows that I struggle with depression, what that could mean.
Right. Exactly.
That's a problem. And I think that we should be more vocal about the dangers of that. I think that we should absolutely start having that conversation a lot louder than we currently do.
You want to hear, God, now all of a sudden I'm thinking of all the messed up things in my life where I mentioned with my brother. My brother ended up serving a long time in jail, got cancer in jail, did not get the proper treatment, but it ended up, I don't think it ever really went away and might have contributed to his death. But he was drunk and he ran over a whole family. He is lucky he didn't kill somebody, just a family crossing the street. And he took off, hit and run, my own brother, because he didn't want to get caught. Like, it's just bad. It's just bad, and it just really makes you wonder if society was just a little bit more different and open, and rather than treating people who have whatever struggles they might be, because we just talked about two of them, but I'm sure there's some that really haven't touched you or I very much that other people have. I know, like, people are more used to my, in your face, the barbed dildos and all that kind of stuff. But they don't realize that my heart for liberty, actually, there's a speech. It's on my channel. Anyone can look it up. It's called The Humanitarian Responsibility of Freedom, where I believe that the ultimate highest calling of a libertarian is to be your brother's keeper. I utterly reject the Ayn Randian concept of altruism being a vice. And while you can be an asshole libertarian and still be a libertarian, you're going to be a libertarian I don't want to be around. You're free to be an asshole. But I do think that once you've truly embraced freedom, that should make you the biggest humanitarian there is.
Without a doubt. And one of the things that I'd like to talk about is an economy is only as healthy as the people contributing into it. And I what that means is that, here's the thing, right? Not everybody who does these substances will be an addict at all. They won't. There's plenty of people out there, and I celebrate those people who are able to use narcotics at will and be a weekend warrior with it. Man,
I'm one of them. I'm one of them.
You.
As I said, it's a gene, though. I really do think it's a gene that I just happen to have.
Right. So, and hammer down is all I'll say. Like, go get it. Like, I applaud you for that. But at the same time, to just like put our heads in the sand and pretend like we don't need to have a solution we talk about amongst ourselves to those in our society who are crippled with this affliction. I think that would be something that hurts us in the long run instead of helps us, right? So yeah, I'm not an economist at all. Like, I am probably the dumbest libertarian you will ever have on your show. The only area I'm good on is drug policy. That's it. Like, and that's all I talk about. But from what I can gather, that whole, healthy people contribute into a healthy economy.
Yeah, because Daniel Tweet had brought up, why must society treat consciousness alteration as an all or nothing proposition? And that's true. I think that also happens too. But I think it's got to be very individuated. As you said, there are some people who can be the weekend warriors, and there are other people who that weekend will ruin the next decade of their life. And you've got to learn what kind of person you are.
Yeah. And here's kind of one of the things about the black market being what it is that creates a bigger problem, is that those people who are capable of using drugs successfully and not having any kind of real problems, they'll never know that, because you can't go buy a substance and have an honest conversation with the retailer. Like, you're buying it in the back alleyway. Yeah. Like, everybody is going to give you some weird bro science. Like, I distinctly remember the first time I shot up heroin, the guy who gave it to me said, "Look, bro, just don't do this for any more than 3 days in a row and you'll be fine." Like, that is the shit that I got in my head, but I interviewed Dr. Carl Hart. And for those of you out there who haven't read his book, Drug Use for Grownups, check it out. It's so good.
I have. It's good. He's just a really laid back, cool author. And Stephen Ecker just made a contribution, which I will get to as soon as YouTube distributes the super chats. It's usually like mid-month, so mid-April. Okay. I'll get that over to you. If I can do it sooner by just, I'm not working right now, by, switching things around. But so you got a $50 super chat from Stephen Ecker. Thank you much, Stephen, for your support. We really do appreciate it. And somebody had asked, and I think it was on one of my threads, and I think you've answered it, but just in case people are coming in late, as long as people are willing to respect that this is a sober space, the people who are coming don't have to be teetotalers. Like, people can see them later at the bar later on, and it won't wreck somebody's world, as long as they respect that when they come to your space, that it's to be a space for people who don't want to be around that for whatever reason. Am I understanding?
Yeah,
I just want...
Absolutely. So it's a place to decompress, You know how conventions are, especially when we start talking Robert's rules. We're going to be a little elevated. On top of that, we're going to be in the middle of this damn casino, So, and so it's going to be nice to have that space. But anybody is welcome to attend. I don't care if you're staggering drunk. You can come hang out with us. Just don't bring your booze in with you. You won't be judged. You won't be looked down upon. And it's literally just, we're not going to be in there chanting and singing Kumbaya. We're just going to be hanging out without any booze around. Simple as that.
For all you know, there could be somebody there who just realizes right then they have a problem and are looking for other libertarians to talk to and have some support.
Absolutely.
And
sorry, I keep cutting you off. I feel like I'm sorry. If you are one of those people, you are free to contact any of us at any point in time, and we will absolutely keep every single detail about you anonymous. We'll not. Discretion is the name of the game. You got a friend here.
That is fantastic, and I'm so glad you brought up that one book because I had recently read it, and it was very eye-opening. In that I actually heard of him through Reason, because Reason had an interview with him where he talked about the importance of social support networks. And I hear lately a lot of the poo-pieing, the 12-step programs don't work, or they're mixing in religion. And really, it's just a higher power. It can even be yourself. And I think what they are missing in that, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that I think he hit the nail on the head, is the social support system those programs provide. The framework around it is almost, the steps are proven, but it's almost window dressing. It's the people you're going through it with. To me, that's the way at least it seems to me.
Yeah, so I have interviewed, I am a 12-step person myself. That's where I found my solution. But on my show, I have interviewed so many different people from all walks of life and all different stories of recovery who use different pathways to get there. There's 3 things every single one of them have done, whether in the 12-step rooms or not. And that is You found a group of people that you can trust and rely upon. You clean up some of that wreckage of your past by talking to these people about it, sorting out your current affairs and your past affairs, and then you help others do the same. Those three things right there are what make it work. You could call it AA, you could call it NA, you can call it refuge recovery, you can call it whatever you would like. As long as those three things are taking place, you got the same program across the board. But there probably is a little bit of a gripe to make about the over religious connotations that are in some of those places. I get the apprehension. Absolutely.
But from what I understand, not having gone through one myself, is that they don't push a particular religion. I could be wrong. God, I hope I don't offend anybody. I think everyone has a metaphysics, whether or not it's in a personal God or anything. If you have consciousness, you have a metaphysics. And even if they think it's tapping into just something greater within yourself, or just being part of the biosphere, like to get even a little bit more pagan about it, I think everyone innately has some kind of spirituality, and it doesn't have to be religion.
Yeah.
I think consciousness itself is innately a spiritual experience, because we have things that other things around us don't have, and I don't think you have to be a quote unquote religious person to tap into that you could be a hardcore atheist and tap into that. I happen to be a Christian myself, but I've known plenty of spiritual atheists. It's just a different kind of spirituality.
And our the book that we use, one of the books we use in Narcotics Anonymous, is called The Basic Text, and it's a piece of literature that talks about the program of recovery. Then at the back of it, there's personal stories. And in the current 6th edition, there's actually a story about an atheist who found their solution in Narcotics Anonymous, and they're still an atheist today. So you are absolutely right that these your typical 12-step program is not going to push a certain religion on you. Spirituality is the name of the game. As a matter of fact, they say in every single meeting, this is a spiritual, not religious program. And so, and that's kind of what it's about, right? Like when we are stuck in our addiction, it's a very selfish place that we find ourselves in. We find ourselves seeking out us and us alone. So getting away from that, starting to pay attention to your community, starting to pay attention to other people around you and the effect that you have on them, that's spiritual in nature. That's
right.
Tapping into that biosphere, like you said, that's becoming one with your environment.
Well, Drew, I'm not going to keep you much longer, but do you have a website as well, or where else? Like, tell everyone where we have, because I know when it comes up to conventions, fundraising is king, and that's why I put that up there, because I know you have supplies, you've got things you've got to get. But if people want to reach out and speak with you or learn more about what your organization is doing, like what's your social medias and all that kind of thing?
You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on Twitter at LP Sober Caucus. You can find me personally at LibertyDrew84. We do not currently have a website because we just have some pocket change and a roll of duct tape. None of us know what the hell we're doing. We do have a Discord. Yeah. So like we're kind of bougie now, right? Like we got that going for us. But in the future, we do hope to have a website, but for the time being, feel free to reach out to us. And, no matter what, whether you want to be a member, whether you have a loved one who's struggling, I'm telling you, you get involved in recovery long enough, you start to know people all across the country, and a lot of us do. Like we span quite a few different states right now. So holler at us. We'd love to meet you.
Yeah. Greg says you have a few paper clips too, so don't sell yourself short.
Oh yeah, we do. We do have a few paper clips.
Well, great. Drew, it's been super, super enjoyable, and I look forward to seeing you. I definitely will be stopping by, and I wish you all the best of luck. And honestly, I do believe that over the course of what you're doing leading up to this, you don't know who's hurting. You may, just by the very words you're saying, be saving a life and never even know it. So bless you for what you're doing.
Thank you.
All right,
Standing
you have
on
a
the
good
shoulders
night.
of giants, Thank you.
All right, you have a good night, and thank you so much for going on, for coming on. This is much more uplifting than I normally do, and I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, same
Thank
here.
you
Thank
so
you for
much.
having me.
You have a good night. Bye-bye.
what you're given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians, and choose to be an accountant because it's safe in a business, not